Well, listeners know that we do not shy away from hard topics here at the Our Time to Rise podcast. And it's because that's real life. Life can have a lot of grief and a lot of hard. And we have a special guest today to help guide us through this conversation of what it is to feel a bit brokenhearted. And in midlife, we can have a lot of grief, a lot of loss that's very tangible, and also intangible loss that can create a hurting heart. And Linda Dillow has a new book out titled Hope for My Hurting Heart. And it is going to be the jumping off point for our conversation. But before we get started, I want to remind you of who Linda is. Linda is a best-selling author and respected Bible teacher and conference speaker. Her books include the popular Calm My Anxious Heart, Intimate Issues, and What's It Like to Be Married to Me? Now, that's a book I haven't read, but I'm a little scared to read, maybe. Linda, like me and Krista, is a mother of 4 children, and she also has 10 grandchildren. She and her husband, Jody, lived overseas for 17 years and now live near me in Colorado Springs. And it is my delight to welcome my new friend, Linda Dillow, to the podcast. Linda, thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's a privilege to be here. I'm excited.
Linda, your book, Calm My Anxious Heart, I know I speak for many women when I say this, but it was very impactful for me in my young life. I mean, what year was that published? It was a while ago.
1999. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. And I don't remember exactly when it landed in my lap, but it was the perfect time when it did. And your words are so helpful. And that book in particular, for anyone who is struggling with some anxiety about anything is really, I would recommend it wholeheartedly. So with this book, Linda, I'm assuming that to write a book like this, you have your own story of struggles. So let's just start there. Where did you encounter some deep struggle in your life?
It started when I was a little girl, and I grew up in a home with a wonderful, wonderful mother and an abusive alcoholic father. My father took his anger out on me, and by the time I was a teenager and getting ready to graduate from high school, I was dating a college boy and he had cancer, and I watched him die of cancer. And so I was watching my family fall apart and facing death when I was 18, and I had no skills. My family weren't Christians. I didn't know anything about Jesus really, and I ran away to another state to college because I just wanted to get away from the pain. And I was a pretty good actress. I looked good on the outside and I shoved all the pain down inside. And I became a sorority girl. I acted like a college girl, and nobody knew that I was dying inside and that I hated my father. I hated him. That's not a good way to start your adult life, with hate. And that's why God's word says, don't let a root of bitterness grow in you, because it doesn't do good things to any part of your life. And I had that root of bitterness growing in me because my father had torn our whole family apart. And by that time, my mother had divorced him, but I hated the man. So I went off to the University of Oregon to school, and Jesus found me. I danced around for several months because Jesus loved me unconditionally. He forgave me unconditionally. And what a gift. He gave me the gift of heaven, but he gave me a purpose for life. And it was the most beautiful and the most wonderful thing. And then all of a sudden I began thinking, well, I need to learn to forgive. And guess who God wanted me to forgive? My father, this man who was sitting in a chair smoking 3 packs of Camels a day and drinking bourbon and milk for breakfast. And I said, God, he doesn't deserve to be forgiven. And he hasn't asked for forgiveness. Why should I forgive him? And God mentioned to me that I hadn't deserved to be forgiven. And so I began a journey of forgiving my father. And I don't remember the very words I said, but it was something like, Jesus, you set me free. I never spoke to my father after that. He died shortly afterwards of all the things he had done to his body. But I was set free. But I still really didn't have any skills to live life. And God began to teach me some skills, and they were wrapped around a Hebrew word, chokmah. And that chokmah word from Hebrew, it means wisdom, but it also is translated skill. And I decided as a young Christian that I wanted to live intentionally. And I know enough about you two ladies that I know that's how you want to live. And I know that's what you tell the people that you talk to on your broadcast, that that's what life is about. And I wanted to live intentionally as a woman before God, but as a wife, if I became a wife, as a mom, as whatever God wanted me to be. And I hoped that would be a speaker, maybe a writer someday. I wish that there was no pain in life. And
Me too.
My first question for Jesus is going to be, Jesus, couldn't you have created a pain-free life? And, I have young women and women in midlife often come up to me and say, Linda, I just don't get it. I mean, I'm having a quiet time almost every day. I mean, I'm in my Bible. I'm trying to pray. I'm trying to do what's right. And yet my husband's in pornography. My kids aren't doing what they're supposed to do. And I thought if I was doing what I was supposed to do with God, that things were going to be smooth in my life. What's going wrong? And I said, well, did you read that in the Bible? And I said, what I read in my Bible is Jesus said that in this world, there's going to be trouble, but that he's overcome this world. And so I've asked him to show me how to live with him in the trouble. And he's just continued to show me what that looks like. And that's a lot of what I wrote in the book.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about a conversation. My son is at Duke Divinity, and he's just beyond his years in so many ways. And he's going into full-time ministry in some way, or academia in biblical scholarship. And he was young. And I remember him saying, Mom, I mean, who are we not to suffer? If we're sharing in the suffering of Christ, really, who are we not to? And that's just not a concept we welcome. That's not a concept we invite or hold. I actually think the Catholic Church maybe does that better than other, aspects of the church. But it is a concept that, where do we start? What is our expectation? Because all frustration is really a violation of expectations in some way. And so what is the expectation that we hold that is keeping us from that posture of enduring and suffering, Linda?
I think of a verse in Philippians where it says that we want to enter into the joy of the resurrection of Christ. And then the verse goes on to say, and into his sufferings, but nobody reads the rest of that. It says, let's have the resurrection, but nobody wants the suffering. And when we lived in Vienna, Austria for 14 years, we were working in Eastern Europe and Russia and Ukraine during the communist era. And so I was rubbing shoulders with women in Ukraine and Russia and Hungary and Romania and Poland while they were in great suffering. And they were my teachers. I'm going to speak about myself, not the rest of the Americans. I'll just say for me, as an American, I'm spoiled. I am just spoiled. I have so much. And I watched my sisters in Romania and in Poland and in Hungary and in Ukraine and Russia who didn't have that much materially, and they were suffering under communism, and their eyes were on their God, and they were trusting Him. And they were so different than the rest of the country. They were shining. They were like a city on a hill. They had salt, and they were different. And I can remember standing in their midst, just watching them. And we came home one summer to America, and we were staying with friends. And my dear friend we were staying with kept talking about how terrible it was because her swimming pool wasn't finished as soon as it was supposed to be finished. And I thought, oh, we're just spoiled. I'm sorry, ladies, but we're just spoiled that my friends in Romania had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to stand in line to hope that there was food for their family. But here we are in America complaining because our swimming pools aren't finished on time. And so suffering to us just isn't in our vocabulary.
I can certainly relate to having people in my life that offer me different perspectives of what it is to be in need and in want. And I'm thinking as you're talking right now about someone I know from our neighborhood who has very little and has very little hope in her situation, and yet kind of has this communal experience with God because her lack of hope in her external circumstances brings her every step into a pace with God because she really is depending on Him to protect her, to meet her needs. And so when I am with her, when I am in her presence, I realize how many things I worry about that really aren't problems. They are nuisances that I might frame as a problem. And I'm thinking about the heart skills you talk about in your book. And you mentioned that you were talking with women on the other side of the world who are in war-torn places, that the heart skills are universal because the gospel is universal. It meets all of our needs right where we are, right in our pain points. And when I'm thinking about something theologically and ask, is this true? One of the questions I ask, is this true for everyone, regardless of circumstance? When we're in pain, things like hope are a universal need and a universal desire of our heart. How did you come to the 8 heart skills that you talk about? What were you thinking of, or what did you consider as you laid those out, knowing that they are true for every woman in every circumstance?
I think I thought as I got older that life was going to get easier. And I hope for a lot of the women listening that that will happen for them. But that wasn't God's plan for me. And the last 5 years of my life have been the most difficult.
Mm.
And during COVID, both of my daughters had cancer.
Mm.
And we were in Colorado, and one daughter was in California, and the other daughter was in New Jersey. I had one daughter on the East Coast with triple negative breast cancer, and a daughter in California with liver and pancreatic cancer.
Mm.
Oh, Linda.
They were both very, very seriously ill.
Mm.
And Jody and I had our bags packed to fly to New Jersey to be with our daughter Robin because she was going through chemo and her 3 children were doing school at home because the schools were closed. So I went to help with the kids and with her because she was going to be going through chemo. And the bags were packed, one full of things for the grandkids and one for us to take because we didn't know how long we'd be staying. And the night before we were to leave, our son-in-law called and said, I hate to tell you this, But because of what's happening in New York and New Jersey and how bad the virus is here and how immune suppressed Robin is, the doctor has said that no one can come in our house, not even you. So even if you get on the plane, you will not be allowed to come in our house. So what do you think I did? I did what any self-respecting mother would do. I went and I sat by the suitcases and I sobbed. And I sobbed until there were no tears left. My daughter needed me and I couldn't get to her. And a couple weeks later, she had a horrible reaction to the chemo and her blood levels tanked when she was taken in the night by ambulance to Sloan Kettering Cancer Hospital in New York City and was there for quite a while. And of course, her husband couldn't go. Nobody could go with you any place during COVID. It was a very hard time. And my daughter in California was getting worse. And she had gone to Arizona with her husband for treatment. And I had flown there to be with her. And I walked around my house crying. And I said, God, I thank you for your word. I thank you for your presence. I thank you for your voice. But I feel like I'm slipping down a slide. And the slide is doubt. God, why did you let this happen? I've never had cancer, and both my daughters have cancer. Why not me, God? I'll take it. Give it to me. Discouragement. God, I feel like I'm sliding down. Doubt, discouragement. God, I don't want to go down this slide into despair and end up at the bottom of a slide in a horrible place. God, I've got to put a stake in the ground for hope. Mm. And you are my hope. And so I said, show me what to do to cling on to hope. And he had me write a declaration of hope. And it was my stake in the ground. And it was 3 things. And the first thing was, God, don't waste my pain. If I have to go through this, don't waste it. And the second thing was from Romans 5. God, use it to change me. Use it to change me to be more like you. And the third thing was from 1 Corinthians, where it says that God is the God of all mercy and the God of all comfort, and that he will comfort me. I said, God, I do not want to go down that spiral and end up in a horrible place, sitting in the pit. And I said, I want you to comfort me with your comfort, then you will use me to comfort others. Mm-hmm. Ladies, that's where our hope is. When we go through a hard time, and, while I was watching my daughter suffer, my neighbor, the first week of COVID, my sweet neighbor Shannon, who has MS and hasn't been able to drive for 20 years, she walks with a walker and a brace on her leg. And her husband went to West Point. He was an elder in the church and led a small group. But he came to her the first week of COVID and said, I'm tired of your MS. I'm fed up with the fact that you can't do what my friends' wives can do. And I'm out of here.
Wow.
And of course, there was another woman waiting in the wings. And Shannon can't live by herself. And so what does she do? That hurts. She's rejected because she has an illness and she can't do what the other wives do. And so Shannon and I talked a lot, and I gave her a book on forgiveness. And we prayed together, and she said, Linda, I realize I have a choice before me. And she says, I can be bitter or I can be better. And she wrote a declaration of hope. And that was 3.5, 4 years ago. And I asked her recently, and I said, Shannon, what difference did it make that you forgave your husband when he didn't deserve to be forgiven? She says, it made all the difference in the world. And do you know this woman walks with her walker around the neighborhood and waves to everybody and smiles. And she's probably the most appreciated person in our neighborhood because she's a hope, not a hopeless woman. And what's the difference? It's not that her husband is a good man, he's a creep. And sorry, but that's what he is. Is it okay to say that on your broadcast?
Yes, it is, Linda. Yes, it is.
Yes,
That's
because
what
we're all cheering for Shannon right now.
Shannon is an amazing woman, and her story is in the book because she says, I am better, not bitter. But that's what hope does for us.
Hope saves our life. I mean, I think about that. I hear story after story about how when we actually turn to hope in our circumstance, and for some, like it's an actual lifesaver. Like they don't take their own life because they find hope.
Right,
And
exactly.
so it's an actual lifesaver. And yet also it's a metaphorical lifesaver as well, that it metaphorically revives us in us. It is that important. And so bring on the hope declarations, bring them on, because we all have our heart. And Linda, I am so sorry about your daughters. And that is such a moving story. And it's so gut wrenching. And I think, yeah, that is so hard. And then I hear, all these other stories, and that is so hard. And we all have our version of hard, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I keep saying that because I'm in my own version of hard right now, but it's no different than someone else's version of hard because we all have it. And so I love this hope declaration that whatever you're going through, and honestly, my version of hard is going to change. This version of hard may change. And then now I've got a whole nother version of hard, right? We don't ever stop needing those hope declarations.
We don't. And we need them at different seasons of our life. And I think sometimes in the good times, we just kind of forget about it. We just da 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 da. We just go along, and then all of a sudden there's a crisis, and oh, I need you, I need you, and then we cling to him. But as soon as things get better, we forget about him again. What if we did that in a marriage? How do you build intimacy? You build intimacy by spending time together and by being together and by listening to one another and by really sharing love together. I mean, I need to be in his presence. And, and you don't have to be on your knees. That's just my posture. You can be in a chair. You can be out walking in nature. And I do that too. I take my golden retriever and we go out and walk every morning. And whatever way God shows you, and you need to be open to the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit lives inside you, and you need to know him and talk to him. Women are afraid of him, but he lives inside you. You are his home, and you need to get to know him. To him because he prays for you. And if he's praying for you, it would be a good thing for you to know him.
Well, Linda, let's talk about a couple of the other heart skills that have been especially powerful for you in your life. Like, what would you say are maybe one or two more that you feel like, yeah, these have really saved me?
One that I really learned during the time with my daughters is what I call worship in the minor key. And that's lament. And I think it's something that here in America, we don't know anything about. We love to worship. We love to worship joyfully, but we don't know about worship in the minor key. And in our Christian world in America, in both the Protestant faith and the Catholic faith, we don't have a way to express pain well. The Jewish faith does. One of my daughters is in heaven. Our oldest daughter died of cancer. And if we had been Jewish, there would have been a pattern for a year of how to grieve. In my Christian faith, there's none of that. What do we do as Christians? We have a memorial service and then we go back to work. And so, what we have in Christianity, and I'm speaking from someone who mentors several therapists here in Colorado Springs, is we have a lot of people who have stuffed their pain because the proper thing they think to do. Jesus didn't just weep before God, he was in such agony of spirit and he was wailing, he was sweating blood. That is great grief. And if you've read many of the Psalms, you know that there are some Psalms where David and the other psalmists got very angry with God. And Job got angry with God. Habakkuk got asked why God 3 times. It's not wrong to ask why. It's not wrong to express our grief. And yet, as I talk to women, they're very afraid to be honest before God. They feel like they have to be very polite in their prayers. I'll just tell you one story of a very precious, godly woman who's a Christian leader who found out her husband, he wasn't just involved in pornography, but that had led him to go to strip clubs and other things. And she did what she knew to do. She prayed, she read her Bible, and then she was so upset inside, it didn't help. She went to a counselor, and the counselor said, you know, the psalmists really express their grief. You have been violated. Violated. Express it to God. Express it to your husband and to God. And get down on your face. Go to a place where you can be real and honest to God. And the next day, she went someplace where no one could see her, and she got down on her face and started weeping. And she said, I had things coming out of my eyes and my nose and my mouth, and I'm glad nobody could see me. I was a mess, but I wept it all out before God. And I told him I wanted to trust him, but I didn't even know how to spell that word right at the moment. Would he please bring me back to trust because I loved him? And I just got honest with him, and I told him I loved him, but I was hurting so much inside, and would he come into the hurt and help me? And she said, it was like he just took my heart in his hands, and it was like he just sat there with me, and he understood, and he just loved me. And she said, I began to heal.
How did you then end up entering into that yourself with your daughter? And that's just, I mean, it's the greatest fear of every mother.
I obviously prayed that both my daughters would live. I mean, of course I did. I gave them to him, but I said, God, I ask you for their lives. God chose to let one live. 4 years later, she is still struggling physically and emotionally. Cancer can do a real number on your body, and so can chemo. But God took her sister and her best friend, and that's been very hard for her. And she took care of her and nursed her the last 6 weeks of her life. And that was very hard for her with Joy's husband. But, you know, I worshiped every day. I called it my cancer survivor song. It's called New Wine, and it's a surrender song that God plow up the ground and do whatever you want in my life. I retreated a lot, I think. I had to get very quiet. My best friend Lorraine, who helped me write the book, was over all the time and just loved on me and prayed with me and worshiped with me. It was hard. I won't tell you it wasn't hard. We all sat around her bed, 8 of her friends, all of the kids, the grandkids, the family. And it was her husband came up at the end of the day after she died and said, "This was a beautiful day." And I looked at him and I thought, does he really think that? She
Mhm.
died. And yet it was a beautiful day. And I went alone and I said, God, can you show me what it's going to be like for her? I said, can you give me hope today? And he gave me a vision of her. And they had this huge dog that was Joy's favorite, Bernese mountain dog that looked like a lion, and they named him Aslan. And immediately I saw her on Aslan, and she was healthy and laughing, and she had one hand on his mane and one hand in the air, and she was smiling, and it was just beautiful. Has it been an easy journey? No, it
Mhm.
hasn't been. And did I raise my hand and volunteer for it? Absolutely not.
Mhm.
But our whole family, I would say, is closer because of it and because of both of the girls having cancer. But did I want it? No. You have to know hope, and you have to know God's love. You have to know how much He loves you, and you have to experience it, not just know it here. You have to dip down to loss and lament, and you have to understand loss. And I think, particularly because I've lived in Europe and in Asia, I think those people are more willing to look at loss than we are. I think we ignore it. I'll speak about myself. We don't want to look at it. We want to be happy. And we will do anything. We will go shopping. We will spend money. We will eat. We will have people over. We will even do Christian things. We will just keep the happy going. We will keep the positive going. But at some time, you have to go briefly into the loss and the lament, but then you come out and you're able to trust and you're able to forgive and you are able to go into encourage and praise and you end up praising God. But I think so many of us get stuck and we're not willing to briefly go in to the more negative part. And it really isn't negative. It's just, God says, He says it in Psalm 139. He says that in other Psalms, let me search you and know your heart, and I will do work in you. But we don't want Him to do that. We want to keep it on the happy level.
Well, Linda, thank you so much for this message and the way that you have walked in it. I mean, authentically through it. I was reading the other day just about our emotions. Actually, the way through them, right, is you have to move toward them. You're like the buffalo going toward the storm instead of running away from the storm. You're like the buffalo running into it so that you can move through it. That's exactly what you've done. As we are ending today, what would be your final words of encouragement for women who need hope right now?
Just that God is a God of hope. Get to know Him personally and seek out women who know Him personally and have a deep personal intimacy with Him and say to them, will you teach me? Will you take me with you on a journey? I want to know Him personally. I want to have that intimacy that you have, because that's what will take you to hope. And write a declaration of hope and
Mhm.
put it in the ground.
Mhm.
I love it.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, Linda.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. It's been a joy.